In the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, Desmond Doss grows up in a deeply religious household with his mother, Bertha, his father, Tom, a former soldier, and his brother, Hal. Desmond's childhood is marked by a painful incident. During a fight with Hal, tensions spiral out of control, and Desmond nearly kills his brother with a brick while defending himself. Although Hal survives, the incident leaves Desmond deeply disturbed. His mother's reaction only adds to his guilt, as she tells him that violence is among the worst sins a person can commit. 15 years later, Desmond is helping at a local church when he witnesses a man being seriously injured in a street accident. Without hesitation, he rushes to help. Using his belt as a makeshift tourniquet, he manages to slow the man's bleeding before taking him to the hospital. The doctor praises Desmond's quick response and tells him that his actions saved the man's life. While watching the medical staff work, Desmond realizes that he has always been fascinated by medicine. He dreams of becoming a doctor, but his limited education makes that goal seem almost impossible. At the hospital, he meets a nurse named Dorothy and immediately becomes interested in her. Looking for an excuse to stay near her, he even volunteers to donate blood. Desmond soon returns to the hospital, dressed neatly and determined to ask Dorothy on a date. Their first outing goes surprisingly well, although Desmond is inexperienced when it comes to romance. At one point, he kisses Dorothy without asking, leaving her uncomfortable. She makes it clear that he should have asked first. Despite the awkward beginning, the two grow closer, and Dorothy starts sharing medical books with him so he can continue learning about medicine. Their peaceful life changes when Hal announces that he has secretly enlisted in the army to fight in World War II. He waited until everything was finalized because he knew his family would object. His prediction proves correct. Bertha strongly opposes Hal joining the military because taking another person's life violates her religious beliefs. Tom also struggles with the sight of his son wearing a military uniform because it reminds him of the horrors he experienced during his own service. Soon afterward, Desmond tells Dorothy that he intends to enlist as well, but he wants to serve as a medic rather than a combat soldier. Dorothy supports his decision, and Desmond asks her to marry him. She happily accepts. They make plans to marry during his first leave from military training. Before leaving, Desmond visits his father at a cemetery where Tom is standing among the graves of his fallen comrades. Tom bitterly reflects on how many young men believed war would bring glory, only to end up dead. He admits that he cannot bear the thought of burying another one of his sons and fears Desmond will not survive. Desmond eventually reports for training at Fort Jackson. Dorothy gives him a Bible containing her photograph, hoping it will remind him of her and his faith while he is away. At the training camp, Desmond meets the other recruits, including Smitty, a confident soldier who quickly begins teasing him. Their drill instructor, Sergeant Howell, makes an unforgettable entrance, immediately establishing himself as an intimidating and aggressive presence. Howell treats the recruits harshly throughout basic training. Desmond struggles with certain exercises, especially tying knots, but his experience growing up in the mountains gives him an advantage during the obstacle course. Everything changes when the recruits begin weapons training. Desmond refuses to pick up a rifle. Howell takes Desmond to Captain Glover, who believes his refusal makes him unreliable as a soldier. He explains that because of his Seventh-day Adventist beliefs, he cannot take a human life. He also observes the Sabbath on Saturdays and believes he can serve his country without carrying a weapon. Glover attempts to have him removed from the army through a psychiatric evaluation, assuming that someone who refuses to use a weapon must be mentally unstable. Howell then humiliates Desmond in front of the other recruits, portraying him as someone who cannot be trusted in combat. That night, Smitty attempts to provoke him by taking his Bible. Instead of fighting back, Desmond calmly asks for it to be returned. His refusal to react only frustrates the men trying to break him. During his psychiatric examination, Desmond explains that he is completely aware of his beliefs and understands the consequences of his decision. He insists that he is not mentally ill. He simply refuses to violate his conscience. The psychiatrist agrees and declares him mentally fit for service. Since Glover cannot legally discharge him, he orders Howell to make military life as difficult as possible. Desmond is given the worst assignments, including unpleasant cleaning duties. Howell also tells the other soldiers that their weekend leave has been canceled, making Desmond the target of their frustration. Eventually, the resentment becomes violent and several soldiers attack Desmond. Despite his injuries, Desmond refuses to identify anyone responsible. He simply claims that he was hurt in an accident. When the rest of the unit receives leave after completing training, Desmond is arrested for insubordination and faces the possibility of spending the war in prison. Meanwhile, Dorothy waits for him at their wedding ceremony. She knows Desmond would never willingly abandon her, and she realizes something must have gone terribly wrong. While imprisoned, Desmond is visited by Captain Glover, who offers him an easy way out. If Desmond pleads guilty, the matter can be resolved quietly. But Desmond refuses to compromise his beliefs. Dorothy also visits him and tries to convince him to reconsider. She argues that learning to fire a rifle does not necessarily mean he will have to kill anyone. Desmond, however, remains determined. Desperate to save her fiancé, Dorothy contacts Desmond's parents. Tom eventually travels to Fort Jackson wearing his old military uniform and all of his medals. He demands to speak with his former commanding officer, who has since risen to the rank of brigadier general. During Desmond's court-martial, he maintains his plea of not guilty. Just as the court is about to sentence him, Tom arrives with a letter from the brigadier general. The letter reminds the tribunal that American law protects the rights of conscientious objectors. Faced with the possibility of creating a constitutional controversy, the tribunal drops the charges. Desmond is cleared and finally allowed to continue training as a combat medic. After winning his legal battle, Desmond and Dorothy finally marry. By 1945, Desmond's 77th Division is sent to Okinawa in the Pacific. As the soldiers arrive, they immediately witness the horrifying consequences of war. Bodies are being carried away from the battlefield, making it clear that they have been sent to replace men who never returned. The surviving soldiers are combined with Glover's unit, and Desmond meets the other medics. Soon they learn about an enormous cliff known to American troops as Hacksaw Ridge. The Americans have already tried several times to capture the ridge, but the Japanese defenders have repeatedly forced them back. The Japanese also deliberately target wounded soldiers, forcing Desmond to conceal his medic insignia for his own protection. The assault begins with heavy naval bombardment. Explosions shake the ridge as American troops climb toward the Japanese positions. Once the fighting starts, Desmond proves exactly why he came. While armed soldiers fight, he moves through the battlefield searching for wounded men. He treats soldiers who others believe are already beyond saving and carries them to safety. Smitty, who once mocked Desmond, begins to see him differently. Instead of viewing him as a coward, he realizes that Desmond is willing to enter the most dangerous areas without a weapon simply to save lives. As night falls, the Americans establish defensive positions. Howell warns everyone not to leave their shelters because Japanese forces are still nearby. But Desmond refuses to accept that wounded soldiers should be abandoned. He ventures back onto the battlefield and rescues several men before taking cover with Smitty. During the night, Desmond has a terrifying dream about being attacked by Japanese soldiers. When he wakes, he talks with Smitty about his fear of weapons. Desmond finally reveals the painful reason behind his convictions. Years earlier, he had confronted his drunken father after witnessing him abuse his mother. During the confrontation, Desmond wrestled a gun away from Tom and pointed it at him. Seeing his father broken and terrified made Desmond feel as though he had already killed him in his heart. From that moment forward, Desmond promised God that he would never touch a weapon again. Smitty responds by sharing his own painful childhood. He never knew his father, and his mother abandoned him at an orphanage. The two men realize that despite their differences, both have been shaped by difficult pasts. At dawn, the Japanese launch a massive counterattack. The Americans are caught off guard and begin retreating. Smitty is fatally wounded before Desmond can get him to safety. As the soldiers withdraw from the ridge, Desmond hears wounded men calling for help. Instead of retreating with everyone else, he decides to stay behind. Ignoring the danger, Desmond moves across the battlefield, locating injured soldiers and bringing them to the edge of the cliff. Using a rope, he lowers them to safety one by one. Hours pass, but Desmond refuses to stop. Glover eventually realizes what Desmond is doing and orders artillery support to protect him. The bombardment provides some cover, but it also reveals Desmond's position to the enemy. Even when Japanese soldiers move dangerously close, Desmond continues his mission. At one point, he hides from enemy troops by using the battlefield itself as cover, allowing him to remain undetected before continuing to rescue another wounded soldier. Desmond even treats wounded Japanese soldiers when he encounters them. Despite everything happening around him, he refuses to abandon his belief that every injured person deserves medical care. As darkness settles over the battlefield, Desmond continues searching for survivors. Exhausted and injured, he prays for enough strength to save one more person. By morning, Glover is stunned to see dozens of wounded soldiers arriving from the ridge. One of the rescued men finally reveals the truth. The man they had all considered a coward had gone back alone and saved them. Desmond later discovers Howell and another wounded soldier. After getting the private to safety, he turns around for Howell. A Japanese sniper fires at Desmond, but his helmet unexpectedly deflects the bullet and saves his life. Howell manages to fire back, revealing the sniper's location. Desmond then helps drag Howell towards safety while enemy soldiers pursue them. Refusing to abandon his sergeant, he continues pulling him down the ridge until they finally reach the bottom. Glover and the other soldiers arrive in time to protect the remaining men. Desmond is treated as a hero and immediately taken to a field hospital. There he receives the devastating news that one of the other medics did not survive. Glover later visits Desmond and sincerely apologizes for doubting him. He finally understands that Desmond's courage was never about fighting the enemy. It was about refusing to abandon anyone who needed help. Glover tells Desmond that the unit will return to Hacksaw Ridge the following day, which happens to be Saturday, Desmond's Sabbath. He assures Desmond that he will respect whatever decision he makes. The soldiers wait patiently while he finishes his prayers before beginning the next assault. This time, the Americans are better prepared. Reinforcements arrive, and Desmond's knowledge of the Japanese tunnels helps the troops gain an advantage. The battle eventually turns in America's favor. At one point, Japanese soldiers approach waving a white flag, pretending to surrender. It is a trap. They attack with grenades, causing further casualties. Desmond is injured while trying to protect his fellow soldiers. His comrades place him on a stretcher and begin carrying him away. Suddenly, they realize that Desmond has dropped his Bible. They stop, retrieve it, and return it to his hands before continuing towards safety. The Americans ultimately capture Hacksaw Ridge, marking a major victory in the campaign. In real life, Desmond Doss rescued approximately 75 wounded soldiers during the Battle of Okinawa. He became the first conscientious objector to receive the Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration for valor. Desmond and Dorothy remained married until her death in 1991. Desmond Doss died in 2006 at the age of 87, leaving behind one of the most remarkable stories of courage, faith, and selflessness in military history. Make sure to subscribe and turn on your notification to watch more videos like this. Thank you for watching.